I am an architect and an environmental planner. So I have always been driven by, initially when I started my architecture, I always thought, I was so much interested in designing buildings and all. But once I started my course, I did realize that, I felt more better looking outside the window. And, how to, and I always wanted to create a link where this outside window things can come into the structure or at least near the structures. So that's when the green building or in terms of nature-based solutions came into my interest. And my PhD project as a part of my extension of my master's project, where I was dealing with how urban areas have an increased temperature, and how can we bring down those temperature like by basic practice. And I do realize when I was practicing with University of Sydney that we always tend to criticize the Indian system. Okay, we are not doing anything, and but that's how the global scenario is. Be it any developed country or the developing nations, we are almost on the same page when it comes to sustainability or bringing nature into the building or curbing down the heats, because sustainability often comes in the end chapter of whatever we design, though it should be the first priority. And starting with that, let me introduce my topic. So it's cooling our city, and what are the practical approaches for heat resilience and climate adaptation. I'll be talking majorly about the Indian cities as well as some areas. I mean, some of the Australian cities, and what are they doing in order to curb down the heat. So I think from early 2000, we have been constantly hearing this word climate change, either as a part of our curriculum or maybe as a warning given in newspapers. So initially I think it never bothered to us. Okay, the climate is changing. So what if the heat? Heat was never a criteria then. In early 2000s, I think we were only talking about melting of glaciers, but we were not talking what will it do. What the general public were not aware. Like if the glaciers melt, if the sea level rises, what will happen? Except that some reports that says Mumbai is going to sink or Kochi is going to sink because they are below the mean sea level. And other than that, nothing much. Or sometimes also about chlorofluorocarbons in our refrigerators. So these were the common terms about climate change, nothing more than that. And then I think mid 2000 or like by 2010, 15, people started talking about urbanization, that people are moving more into cities because it is giving them more opportunities in terms of better livelihood and in terms of more spaces, in terms of more comfort and improving the lifestyles of the people. And then I think that was the time when people started realizing, what sustainability is, and people started criticizing, okay, the city is overcrowding. So what should we do? Now, Navi Mumbai is an example of that. Early, how the city was developed is, when the government decided, no, the Mumbai population is going to increase so much. Now, what should we do? So they thought of building a parallel city, a twin city, and they called it Navi Mumbai. And now, one of the planned cities in India, which to an extent, I always feel is very rich in terms of its natural resources, because we have the creek nearby, we have the Parsik Hill nearby, and luckily, since it is planned, so we have small pocket parks which could actually act as lungs to this neighborhood. So now, just when I was thinking about how to link this climate change and urbanization and sustainability, the image that came into my mind was this. Like we think about how cities are growing, and we think about how to make it more sustainable, about planting trees on rooftop, and having solar panels, having a very beautiful city. But I think it always ends up in being in this the image that you see on the left. That is very that is very conceptual, and it always ends up in that illustration form, never coming into practical reality. Except if people have gone to Singapore, you will see such examples. Singapore, Malaysia, you'll see such examples. But then again, it has many problems. But in case of countries like ours, the reality is very high-rise structures, extreme heat, and I mean lighted up societies and very narrow streets. This is what the reality is. And what happens with this reality is the production of urban heat islands. So this urban heat island basically means that like a particular area in a that particular area is experiencing a higher temperature compared to its counterparts. So if you see this image, what it says is, we have our rural area and then a peri-urban, which is not that high rise, and then we have this industries. So where where these heat starts to come up, and then the city center where we see a very big dome of heat being generated into the atmosphere, and this heat can actually lead to various health conditions, like it deteriorates the health. There's a loss of life, more decreased rate of mortality and morbidity, and increased energy demand to meet this excess heating, and increased crime rate. So I was reading a recent paper where they have taken case of Australia, where they say that when the temperature of the city increases, the crime rate also increases, which is like quite general. Like when we're walking around in a hot summer day, and and then we have and there would be like small triggers, that can and you can that we can that can push us towards violence. So which is quite evident, like people don't talk about it, but yeah, yeah, crime rates also increase when there's an increase in the heat of the city. And then there was this report that says that by 2030, 2% of the total working hours worldwide would be reduced for each year because of the increasing heat, because people are either not able to work, or because it's too hot, or they work in a slower pace. So now this is an image, this is a map of Navi Mumbai. So I have considered only the areas that is under the Navi Mumbai Municipal Corporation. So as I said, the city is very beautiful in terms of, having a creek on one side, there's a hill on the other side, and this connected by different road networks. So I was thinking, since it's a planned city, let me just check, like, how heat has been evolved in the cities, how the city has developed. So we know that this entire city of Navi Mumbai was developed with the concept of node, which is the basic administrative boundary, and Vashi, that this is the first node that was developed by the Sitco back then in 1970s. So what I did was I took the temperature of years 90 from 1990 to 2020. The summertime temperature was taken, and I created a mean, average, what should be an average image, and how each year is differentiating from that average. So when I look into the 1990s or 1995, it was a time when the city was gradually developing. Even 2000 also, 2005 also, it wasn't to that extent. But after 2005, the city started evolving to a greater pace, and which also led to heat islands. So now I have circled few areas just to bring to your notice. The first is the northern part. So the city of Navi Mumbai, or Mumbai, has this importance of railway network. So when they say railway network, the city evolved around the railway network, or people started settling down near the railway network. So the first part, the first image, the first circle that I'm indicating here is basically the northern part of Navi Mumbai, which is a area where the railway networks also flow, and it is predominantly occupied by low-income people. So even in early 1995, people were coming, living in those parts, and it was quite congested. And this is the image that shows the orange color, shows the intensity of the heat. So how the color change, bar changes is, green is an area with very low temperature, and as the temperature rises, it like yellow and then orange. So even in early 95, people were settling in these pockets, and these areas started having increased number of heat pockets within the neighborhoods. Second point I would like to highlight is about this area. So if you see here, it is all green part, and there's a small yellow part. That means green is an area which is actually a cooler spot, and yellow is a point where it is hot. So this is an area. This yellow point is actually built, or a cleared, an open surface in between the mangrove area. So that is why we see again a heat coming up. So initially there was mangroves, and then and it started being cleared off for any other land use purposes. And third point I would like to mention is about this part. This is a part of the Parsik Hill. Here also we see an increased heat pockets, though there is barely any construction seen here. And the reason is like the bare soil has this property to absorb heat, and it radiates heat also. So this map was prepared using the temperature during the morning hours, like prior to 12, so 11:30, 10:30 to 11:30. This was the time that is taken. So even during those time, the temperature is quite more compared to the other part of the city. And then I would like also to highlight about the central part of this is the Vashi area. So if you look into this area, how the heat pockets have been increased over the years is something to completely note, because this is the area on there's one road that is going, and one part is the industrial belt, and another part is the residential area. And this are like instead of small pockets of heat, it has now become into an island, a lot of connected spaces of heat pockets to a very large chunk of heat islands. So then what is sustainable? Like when we talk about sustainability, there are three main concepts that should come into our mind. One is the people. Whatever we do should always have people in mind, both the present generation and the future generation. Second, environment. Like how is environment, which should be play, how should we play with the environment that we don't hamper it. And third, economy. So one reason why sustainability is lagged is because of this economic factor, that is we don't have fund to support our sustainable measures. So, what is our government doing? So, we have a lot of action plans by the government. So, it talks about solar mission, it talks about water, it talks about sustainable habitat, agriculture, and the latest being that National Mission for Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change. This was something that I came to know about recently. So, we have a lot of missions that government is planning. So, these are in general a very large body which takes into account like what should be the like we have this COP meetings, council of parties, we have this targets measure. So these action plan actually give us that target, okay, we have to achieve this much. And then we have an action plan, a heat action plan, which is actually taken up by the local government. So that's actually a state level initiative, rather I should say that a state level initiative, more than state level initiative, it should come to a bottom line where it should be a neighborhood level, because each neighborhood is different. Each neighborhood has a different strength in terms of its natural resources and in terms of its cultural resources. So how heat action plans should be made, like in India, what heat action plan is like, the meteorological department, the disaster management department, and the local health department, they provide the forecast of the heat waves, like when all the heat will, sort of a warning, and then what should be the measures, and also highlight the vulnerable areas. So this is what the government is doing, and as an individual or as a neighborhood, there should be plans that should come up. So we have Mumbai heat action plan, we have Ahmedabad heat action plan, we have Kochi heat action plan. So there are a lot of heat action plan that the cities are taking up by themselves based on the resources that they have. And then there is the guidelines given by the Disaster Management Authority of India, the which practically says like when a heat wave strikes, then how things has to be planned. So this is a basic example that we see around the city, in Indian cities. One is, so first case is the case of Bangalore. So this is a metro station pillar where they have planted around this vertical gardens, and they say it can bring down a temperature. So I mean, they have research which proves that it can bring down the temperature of the area by 2 degree in that particular, to a particular extent. And second is an example of pillars in the Delhi metros. So this is a very common example that we see as one of the measures undertaken in order to reduce the heats. And so this is an example that would like to show in case of how in a local level. So the first case is a commercial building, and they have actually made it all, covered it with creepers and all. So if you look into the first image, I would like to highlight few point. One, yes, it's a very good initiative. But why don't we see this often being practiced in other parts? And not every building would be interested in having creepers around. The second is also a residential apartment. I think it's in Bangalore, if I'm not wrong. So this is an again where they have put, entire big, huge. They have planted trees, or they have planted saplings that grew into a big tree. And third is an example. I mean, I have to remove which municipal corporation this is, but this is what the scenario happens. We tend to plant trees, we tend to propose a lot of measure, but then the maintenance becomes one important factors where, again, like I said, monetary money becomes one factor why the sustainability or why the green measures are not being taken. So if you look into the first image, you can see on this part that there are some black spots. So basically it rained and it actually destroyed the elevation of the building. So now there is nobody to look after, cleaning up of all these things. So this is one major problem, the maintenance of the green, of urban greening. And in this last image that you see, it's actually I was surprised because this was a measure taken in order to uh, increase the green cover of the area of the city. But then you don't see greenness in it. You just see some pots. And, if we're able to look after this, uh, I think we could have better examples to show, like a metro pillar in Mumbai or a metro pillar in Bangalore or Delhi. And then for the low income groups, so this was an example done in Ahmedabad. So Ahmedabad was the first city who actually produced an heat action plan. And what they did was, they looked into the low income societies, and these are the, the asbestos sheet, the roofs were covered with the asbestos sheet. And what we saw was they started creating another type of roof and they called it as a mod roof, which is actually which is made out of husk and many other, biodegradable materials. And they started placing it on top of the constructed roof, and which led actually to a decrease in the temperature. And then this is again another example in Nepal, where they have planned parks in open spaces. So this was their initiative for nature-based solution. So what they did was, in the entire cities, like small spots were collected, small spots were selected, and they started, growing plants there, growing water networks there, because plant and water have this ability to reduce down the temperature in particular areas. And then this is another an example. So this is a very beautiful, case. You see a city, you have the large canopy of the tree, the road is shaded. But what I want to highlight is about these electrical the electrical poles that you see. So what happens is, in coastal areas, especially in coastal areas, if you have a structure like this, you should also have a regulation which says that the tree canopy has to rise above this pole level, because we cannot change. I mean, it is difficult to change the, from the electrical pole on the upper side to, I mean, from the over the land to below the land, if it is difficult to change the electrical wiring and all those system. So what we can propose is, all the trees should have whatever, the canopy that should grow should also consider this height of this electrical poles also, so that canopy does not disturbs the electrical pole, because one strong wind and this electrical this entire wire lines can get disrupted. So then yeah, so this is another example. The first is the case of a tree in my campus. It's very beautiful. Why? Because this one tree is enough to provide shade to a like more than 200 or 300 meter space. So which again would be a very old tree, but that one tree is enough. And this is an example of a case in Netherlands where the bus stations were covered by creepers on top. So again, it needs engineering techniques, it needs maintenance technique, but this is also possible. So what we see is, if you look into the heat maps of cities, the road is an area where heat is affected the most, because it is open, because of the materials that is used in it. So if we propose on, if such a measure that, like, here this bus station is around 30-meter wide, and this 30-meter wide station can actually provide shade to the people who are standing. So if you see in all the bus stands near our place, it is just that shed and a small area to sit. But such measures can help in, again, this has to come at a at a city level, or a neighborhood level, or a municipal level. And again, sorry, I could not get a big image of this, but this is an initial, I mean, this is an interesting picture that I took when my son was returning back from his class. So there is a tree on this side, and there's an area that you have created for people to sit. And there's small plants growing near the tree, and even there were little cat which my son is trying to play with. So all these things are measures that we as individuals, or we as small scale institution, can take up to improve the greening in our cities. Then so this was a basic strategy action plan that I thought, from my understanding, how it should be like. First, the community participation is very important. Once the community start feeling that this city is mine, or this neighborhood is mine, they will automatically make sure that they're not interrupting, that they're not making their city dirty. Second is the state environmental department, because they have the actual data, or they have the quantitative data of what all are the environmental resources the city has. And third is the regional NGO, because you always need somebody to push you. Okay, you have not done this. Okay, it's time to do this. So if all these three can come together and form a committee that looks into the that looks into the fact that the environment, the natural environment, is not disturbed, or it's actually preserved in an area, then it will act, or lead to a lot of initiatives that can be taken. And above all, I always believe that whenever we bring in an initiative, or whenever we bring any change in the network, it is important to go back and see how that change has affected a particular area. So it could be through research, it could be through monitoring the development of any initiatives that we have taken. So well, the first measure what a city, or how we should tackle this heat is, first we need to map the vulnerable areas, like which are all the vulnerable areas. And vulnerable area not just in terms of increased heat, but also in terms of the people, socioeconomic people who are living. Secondly, also creating a warning before the extreme event. So we see this forecast which tells us, the newspaper will always have the forecast telling us, okay, we are going to have heat waves on for so and so days, or the temperature is going to rise. But it only I believe it is important for people to visualize it. And how are they going to visualize it? Because we'll read it through newspaper, but if we have a board which says, just like a signboard which says, okay, today's temperature is this, the city, like we have signboards which is installed by the pollution control board, where they mark what is the NO2 level, or what is the PM10 level. So in a similar way, if we have such warning boards in our neighborhoods, stating that, okay, fine, this neighborhood is going to have this much temperature for this following days, and what are you going to do? So this was another example, creating cool spots. So it is important to have, the shade plays an important role in cooling down the area. So the school spot could be in terms of providing drinking water for the general public who are walking on the road, or maybe, a spot where people can gather in. So in Australian cities, when the temperature increases, uh, the public spaces become cool spots. So, for example, it could be a library, it could be a swimming pool. However, it is possible there because the population is very small, like what compared to what is in India. So when we are thinking about India, we might need to have more cool spots in each neighborhood. And then flexibility of working hours. So in Arab countries, so where the heat is actually, where they have extreme summers. So what they do is flexible in working hours. So they start early and they wrap up their work by 4 noon. And then again, like being an architect, for me, it is important, like, building materials plays an important role. The concrete has this tendency to absorb heat during the daytime, making the building or the internal spaces more warm, and then secreting out the heat during the night. So making the road or the public spaces more warm during the night. So both when you're sitting inside the home, or when you are planning to move out into the home, you are getting that, you're always getting that heat that could be felt. So if we can change the building materials, then it can actually bring in insulation from the natural, from sustainable natural materials. An example of it that I've shown in case of Ahmedabad, where they were using mud roof and then design with the nature. So with that, I would like to state an example. So there was this architect called Laurie Baker. Once he designed a building, and there was a coconut tree that was coming in between the building, and he designed that building surrounding that coconut tree, because he said once, it will take me 1 year to construct this building, but this took this the tree took 8 years for its full, to develop into its present form. So if we are conscious, if we are conscious not to disturb our building, or not to disturb our natural habitats with our development, then I think things become much more easy. Also, another point to mention is, since we are talking, since in case of coastal cities, especially where you have large amount of wind coming in from the coastal area, the sea breezes or the land breezes coming in. If we can, we have GIS techniques which can actually mark the channelize, or which can actually demarcate the channelizing of the wind, then we can actually end up creating, neighborhood spaces which are very, very cool and very, comfortable. So an example of this is case of Navi Mumbai. Also, I would just like to bring, this. So if you look into the southern part of Navi Mumbai, though the temperature has increased, but it is comparatively very low. So this part is very predominantly occupied by high-rise structures, and most of it is built. However, you do not see, much heat pockets here on the southern part. One reason that I could find was when I started drafting the wind movement here. So this you have the wind coming from the sea. You have a, hill that restricts the, wind to flow out of this region. So making this particular area very, warm from its from what the natural case is. So this has been the scenario. So that means, if we look into the design, and we look into various environmental factors while designing our building, it can actually lead towards decreasing the temperature in the city. So now coming to the Australian case study. So there, when I was working on this project, what my task was, to analyze what are the policies given by the local government. So just like we have districts, they have the local government areas. And what are, so we categorized, like while going through all the documents, we categorized what are the measures that they are taken. So one was the urban greening and tree canopy. So like which is like which almost all the city or the local government has been proposing to do that. And interesting part is how are they proposing to increase the green cover? So that was a data-driven tree plantation. So they mark what are the vulnerable areas, or what are the areas which have which lacks the canopy cover. So there was a strategic planning that was involved in urban greening. Second was in terms of changing the building materials. So the pavement, the change, there was a change in the pavement color. There was a change in the rooftop of the building, from dark roof to a lighter roof, which has high reflectance property. So instead of absorbing, it will reflect back. And then community engagement and education. So they distribute plant samplings to people, and they also create awareness among the local people about what are the heat mitigation measure. And then they have the splash parks. So some of the pocket parks have this facility for water sprinklers, where kids or the adults can come and play during the heat, hot summer day. And then water sensitive urban design, so where they are actually monitoring how much water is being taken, so through water meters, and how can we conserve those water. So another point that was seen is the councils which were having higher socioeconomic status were people who were facing significant, significant heat risk. So they are people with less economic background, and they automatically are not doing much initiatives towards, cooling down or curbing down the heat. So again, the barriers that we face is one, there is a policy level barriers. Like there is lack of specific regulation. So as I said, even in case of India, we have a larger policy which says, okay, we have to curb down the heat, or we have to curb down the temperature by this much, but we do not have a particular segment given by this has to be taken, or this has to be taken. But what I suggest is, each local area or each ward has its own resources. Maybe some ward has mangrove cover, maybe some ward has a pond, maybe some ward may not even have all those things. So looking into the assets of the particular ward, what could be, how can we blend all the policies, and how can the local leaders come into action, where you can bring down the temperature. Second, documenting the progress. Like we may propose a particular measure, we may propose a walkway, we may propose a shaded walkway, but is it actually implementing, or is it actually showing any progress? That is another measure. And then collaborative approach, which is very important, because one person or one organization cannot do a particular, cannot single-handedly handle, the entire this entire concept of creating cooler cities. It has to come with different collaboration with the institutes, with the schools, colleges, the RWAs, the local leaders. They have to come together and work progressively together. And then engagement with the community, because if you educate the community, if you make them aware, that's when the community will start, realizing, see, this is the actual problem that is happening in my city. And then the financial barriers, which I again believe is also solvable if we approach, if this collaborative approach comes to picture, then even the financial barriers can be curbed down. So so this is just a basic of what I discussed, like the disconnection between the planning and the financial. This slide basically says about how can we do it. So I always categorize, when we look into a particular city, so there are six main parts that we have to see. One, which is the area which have to be protected. Second, which are the area that has to be defended from any development, no further development. We have to take a stringent action that no development has to be happen in this area. Offensive is like if a particular development has happened and created a problem, then how to rectify it or how to restore it, and opportunistic in terms of what are the probable areas that we can look into, or what are the resources. Like in case of Navi Mumbai, we have a lot of parks, public parks. We have a lot of drainage channels which can actually become cool spots, which can actually be utilized in a better way to become a cool spots. And then resilience, like what like, okay, heat wave is going to come, then how are you going to protect yourself? So there the points of cool spots, such providing drinking water, such things comes into picture. And post processing, which I always believe and always say, that is the most important part, because once an implementation has happened, what is the progress of it? Is it bringing any change? That comes into monitoring aspect. So these six pictures together, if we look into, if we are able to categorize, if we are able to even if it is a small neighborhood, if we are able to frame our structure in this sixth way, we can actually help in creating a sustainable built environment, which is in terms of it having an equitable life, in terms of having a cooler temperature, or in terms of having a better living condition. So yeah, this is how I wanted to conclude my presentation. And yeah, that is it.